You better hear! You better hear! You better hear from me! You better hear!
Mention Southend-on-Sea in casual conversation to anybody that doesn't live here, and it's not unlikely that the response will be a condescending snigger about Essex girls, white van man, or reality TV show The Only Way is Essex. But there's always been more to Southend than these often grotesque stereotypes. Close enough to the heart of London to get there in under an hour on the sea-to-sea line, Southend is also far enough away to have evolved its own distinctive cultural heritage and identity. In 2022, I published Southend on Zine, a book documenting the alternative history of the city as told through the fanzines, people's papers and community magazines made in the town over the last 50 years. A history from below, unlikely to be documented in the minutes of Southend Borough Council meetings or the archives of the Evening Echo newspaper. During my research, I gathered a wealth of material, including artefacts, oral histories and interviews, several of which I wasn't able to use for the book, but which opened up many portals into an otherwise lost or undocumented non-official other history of this city. Now is the time to tell these stories. The You Better Hear podcast is an expansion of the territory initially opened up by the book project, capturing, amplifying and celebrating these hidden voices. The places, faces, spaces and traces, including Southend's rich music history, the rock, punk, jazz, reggae, free improv and experimental scenes, and its clubs and venues. The LGBTQ histories, women's histories, art and cultural projects, protest, activism and anti-racist resistance, street theatre events and much more, linking this with the practice of present-day local zine makers and community and arts activists.
Wilko at the railway, Xeroxed. Called from the bar at the local pub 6 years after the medics said he wouldn't be here. He owns the stage, talks through the verse and rolls back years in the middle eight with that toe-heel shuffle and staccato charge across the floor. The staring eyes and the machine gun stance, guitar aimed at the audience whose mobile phones are raised as if to deflect the shots while filming every chord. Just another Sunday, someone said at the railway in Southend. Over 40 years are brought again to life, and somehow there is magic on the stage from the man who has the tricks to get his business fixed.
Hello, I'm Graham Burnett. Welcome to the latest episode of the You Better Hear podcast. The people of this seaside city have always had a way with words. This is the place that gave us Wilko Johnson, Dr. Feelgood's razor-sharp guitarist and lyricist, whose terse, elemental songs about the Thames Delta, the oil jetties of Canvey Island and working-class lives on the edge were shaped not by academia or metropolitan taste, but by the estuary itself and the voices of the ordinary people who live beside it. Whether it's ranting skinhead poets commandeering the stage during early 1980s punk gigs, experimental readings over live freeform improvisations at the Jazz Centre, open mic slam events hosted in Utopia, Peggy Sues and other independent coffee shops and bars, or Xeroxed zines and packed pub backrooms, Southend has always had something to say, and people determined to say it. Adrian Green has on more than one occasion been dubbed the unofficial poet laureate of this city. It's an epithet he's probably far too humble to accept, but in fairness, he's been active for over half a century now. Back in the 1970s, he was involved with Saga, Southend Action Group for the Arts, and was one of the co-founders of DIY arts and poetry magazine Bang. To this day, he is still actively supporting newcomers on the scene. We caught up for a chat in the bar of the Palace Hotel at the top of Pier Hill, a perfect vantage point overlooking those endless estuarine mudflats that have provided so much inspiration over the decades.
I think I've always been a poet, or at least, no, I wouldn't say that. I've always wanted to write poetry. I haven't always achieved that intention, but I think it's something that's ingrained in me ever since. Before I could read, my mother used to read me poetry. I grew up wanting to write poetry. I grew up wanting to read poetry. It was the only subject I was really interested in when I was at school. So I kept on at it until I got to where I am now, which is far from being perfect. But it's one of those things that you don't set out thinking, I want to do this, but I have to do this. I need to get this down in writing. That's why. I like poetry on the page. I like the noise that words make. I like the way that their sound blends with meaning, and I like the way you can be economical with the words you use so that you can get the most value from them in terms of understanding, using as few as possible. My involvement in the local poetry scene started with the Southend Poetry Group and really promoting poetry events, poetry workshops, and we produced the poetry events to do with the Saga Festival to raise money for Saga in 1976, and we produced events which involved local poets reading, jazz bands playing as well, and so on. We started again independently from Saga producing a magazine called Bang, which ran for several issues, and we had the idea that we should blend local poets with also inviting contributions from poets from elsewhere in the country. And we did this reasonably successfully, I think, because it gave our local poets not only a platform for their own writing and publishing, but also allowed them to measure themselves, if you like, against the sort of work that was being written elsewhere in the country. There were probably poets before then, but to me those were the early days because I was a lot younger than I am at the moment. Eddie Lunt was the chair of the Southend Poetry Group at that time. I was involved. We had John Vidler, his wife Sylvia King, Jane Elaine and Terry Sheppy were some of the poets involved. Dave Carr was involved. He's still going strong and is featured in a number of open mics these days. So yeah, there were quite a few poets around at that time. In terms of public readings, Jack Forbes and Peter Monk used to run a monthly session called the Palace Lunchtime Sessions in the bar of the Palace Theatre, which in those days the bar was upstairs, but the bar there was Saturday lunchtime, and we had musicians, we had poets reading, and at the same time the bar was active, the till was clanging, people were talking. You had to learn to grab the audience so that you could keep their interest, and that was a hard way of learning. I've done a few sessions working with jazz musicians in the Jazz Centre at the Beecroft Art Gallery, where we were reading poetry with the music, and we'd arranged so that the musicians would be playing while we were reading. This worked reasonably well, I think. The audience certainly enjoyed it. It gave the musicians a different challenge to work with a reader. It gave the readers a different challenge to work with the musicians. I certainly enjoyed it. A lot of my poems are about jazz anyway, so we had common ground there. Full moon on the lake, your voice and the water birds celebrate summer. Full old moon on the lake, owls hunting autumnal food. Your voice still singing.
I'm Paul Barrett. I spent most of my formative years living in or around Southend on Sea. Was quite heavily involved in the local sort of punk and skinhead scene from the late 70s through up until about the mid 80s, probably about 85, 86. So I was involved in a band called the Cynics, who were a sort of a local punk band, one of many bands on the scene. There was another band around about the same time called Allegiance to No One, and often we'd play joint gigs. And I met a guy who followed Allegiance to No One and another band called Kronstadt Uprising, and this guy's name was Ian Fry. And Ian would jump up on the stage between the various acts, and he would do a poem or a couple of poems. I always remember one of his poems was about shopping bags. He was a bit of a local character, and I really liked him, and we started talking, and I think in many respects we were sort of kindred spirits. In end of 82, probably 1983, I left the Cynics. I was sort of coming away a bit from that sort of genre slightly, I suppose, and looking towards other media. I was quite interested in writing. So I was also interested in poetry. I liked a lot of the rant poets at the time, people like Seething Wells. So Ian and I got together and we decided that we would join forces and we'd go along to gigs and do a few poems between us. So usually that would probably have amounted to about 4 or 5 poems, and we started doing that. And I don't think we did it that many times. I think it's interesting that people are asking about the provisional Southend poetry group, because we probably did that probably less than half a dozen times in total. So it wasn't like a really big thing. But we'd gone to a gig, and I'm pretty sure it was at the Focus Youth Centre, and we were performing. And I just noticed a couple of guys in the audience, and there's a particular guy, sort of bearded guy, they weren't your normal sort of punters you'd see at an anarcho-punk gig. And I don't know how I came to be talking to them, but I was a bit sort of curious, and we ended up having a conversation. And they'd come along because they'd seen a poster that Ian and I had produced saying Southend Poetry Group. And they said, well, we're the Southend Poetry Group. How can you be the Southend Poetry Group? We thought we'd come along and find out a little bit more about you. And sort of hearing about some of their poetry, there was nothing wrong with it, but it was certainly a very different genre to the type of ranting stuff that we were doing. So Ian and I sort of thought a bit about it afterwards, and we sort of said, well, why don't we become a bit like the the IRA, who were extant at that time, we decided that we would become, rather than being the official group, the provisional wing of the Southend poetry groups. That's where the title came from. So I do remember one really bizarre gig that we did once. I can't remember who. I think it was with Allegiance to No One. I think it was at the Grand in Leigh-on-Sea, and a couple of the poems that I did were avowedly sort of anti-Nazi. One was a poem about sort of taking the piss out of Blood and Honor, which was that sort of neo-Nazi skinhead movement. And I remember there was this great big skinhead guy there who was sort of like clapping, and he was like a Blood and Honor skinhead. But I just think this guy hasn't even got enough brain cells to understand this stuff. Just thought, oh, we must be, and we had short hair. Thought we must be aligned to his particular ideologies. That was a bit bizarre. But I think other than that, we went down, I think, pretty okay. But as I say, I think that was primarily probably because Ian had been around on that scene for a while, and I'd been in the Cynics prior to the SPG, the Southend Provisional Southend Poetry Group. I always think the poetry stuff was a bit of a segue, really, between the Cynics and Hard as Nails. And I suppose I was sort of drifting more towards the sort of skinhead scene. I'd always been really interested in the skinhead scene, not the, just to emphasize again, not the Blood and Honor neo-Nazi scene, which is a complete anathema to me, but more aligned to the original skinhead scene. I quite liked oi music, street punk music as well. And when we performed at Southend Poetry Group, I think if anyone had come along and seen us, there's a couple of photographs from that time. To all intents and purposes, we looked like a couple of sort of, like skinheads, sus skinheads, sort of wearing Ben Sherman shirts, t-shirts, jeans, shiny boots. And I think beyond that sort of got me more into that idea about writing. And I'd always had this idea about producing a fanzine that was avowedly anti-racist and anti-Nazi, a skinhead fanzine that was avowedly different, and that sort of harkened back and reconnected the skinhead scene perhaps to some of those original values from the late 60s around reggae music, being on the street, being working class. And that's really where Hard as Nails started from, really. And I think it's fair to say we were probably the first and initially the only fanzine or skinzine that was promoting that particular view of the skinhead scene.
My name's Jo Overfield. I started running Sundown Arts, which was a kind of mixed arts organisation, and we used to put on spoken word artists and poets, but also it was intermixed with like live music, comedians and what have you. Yeah, a local poet called Jamie Spracklen, who I knew through Stuart Bowditch. Jamie wanted to start just simply a poetry night in Southend, and he called it Sundown. His ethos behind it was, I don't know if it was a quote he made up himself, but when the sun goes down, that's when these kind of creatives and raconteurs come out and join each other to tell stories. And I went along to the first Sundown, which Stuart and Jamie did together, which was upstairs at the Sunrooms. That was 2003. And I loved it. And then I bumped into Jamie at the pub literally a few months afterwards. And I said, I'd love to get involved with helping you running it. So that's when I kind of started to book comedians and live musicians. And sometimes we had short films, and yeah, we mixed it, and it kind of grew from there, really. We were in a few different venues. We went to, after the Sunrooms, we only did one there, and then we went upstairs at the Railway before it was what the Railway became with Fee and Dave, and it was just a pub with a function room above it. We then moved to the Spread Eagle, which did a lot of folk nights, I think, for years in Southend. So then we moved to upstairs at the Royal Hotel, in the ballroom, which was a great venue for us. It had the kind of theatrics that we wanted, and it kind of turned into this kind of cabaret style evening. And then we moved to a couple of different venues. We then went to the Alex at some point. We started to apply for funding from the Arts Council and managed to curate a tent at the Village Green Festival about 3 years in a row. So yeah, it just grew. The funding helped, but obviously it's only for a limited time. So it was always a non-profit organisation, and whatever money we took on the door, which wasn't very much, we would put back into the kitty. I think the thing that I've learned from living here for so long and having been involved with the local art scene for a long time, there's always been art and creativity thriving. Like, there's a lot of creativity in Southend, and yeah, I think all of us that have experienced it and been part of it know that.
Not every fire needs to roar. Some burn low, glowing in stubborn embers that refuse to go out. A well-placed whisper can unravel what was tightly woven. A turned shoulder, a closed book, a meal made with care, not for praise. The matter in the moment, not the need for someone to look. When the world demands haste, slow, semi-supine, hold the door open, long after you've made it through to the other side. Stand tall in atmospheres that press you to fold. Breathe deep. Your lungs a forest, alive with possibility, rooted in the quiet power of saying no. Hands may tremble, but heart holds steady. Speak out, speak truth, in rooms that reward lies, not for applause, but for those who are never allowed inside. Refuse to disappear, even when they try to erase your name. Stay a light. Brightest in the dark is a candle's flame. Execute a radical act. Listen. When others turn away, celebrate the quiet defiance of simply being, choosing tenderness in a machinery of hardness. Standing your ground does not require a raised voice, a barbed tongue. Even the softest of sounds can echo. Volume is not the measure of impact. Do not mistake gentle for surrender. Some storms begin with a simple gust, lifting seeds and shifting dust, changing the very ground beneath us. My name is Ruth Hazel, and I'm also known as Fanny von Beaverhausen. And yeah, so I'm an artist. I make lots of different things. I've moved into sound art now, more so. I've always loved poetry, like from a really young age. And I had a brilliant teacher, Mrs. Bradsmith, and she kind of got me into it. And I always wrote it, but I was always scared to share it. I never really showed anyone. I used to be painfully shy. And when I moved back to Southend, there was a sort of a moment where I didn't know anyone and wasn't sure where to go, what to do. And then I heard about this event called Sundown. And it was billed as like a multimedia arts event, arts and poetry event. And it was just brilliant. And they had poets that they'd booked. They had an open mic as well. They'd have musicians sometimes. There were lots of locals. The people that ran it, which was Joe Overfield at the time. I can't remember the name of the other guy, but yeah, that was my introduction, and it was just such a brilliant and very welcoming and friendly event that eventually I managed to get the courage to read a poem. I think because it's something that everyone can do. Like, you don't need a lot to be a poet, and I know there are things that academics might say you need to be a great poet or whatever, but anyone can put pen to paper or voice it onto something or ask someone to write for them. Like, words are available to most of us, and it doesn't cost anything. And yeah, as I say, as a young child, I got into it. My mum had this Spike Milligan book that had these tiny little poems in it. I loved it. I was undiagnosed dyslexic, so I really struggled reading like lots of text. So these short little poems that I could understand were were great. And I think, yeah, the poetry covers politics and art and love, and it picks out small, minute moments and the beauty in the world, like in such small, it can say so much in quite a small space. Well, I was one of the unfortunate people to get COVID in the early rounds, and ended up with long COVID and some other chronic illness problems. So I don't get out as much as I would like to. But the thing I've noticed about Southend is there is always a poetry scene, no matter what happens. There's a Southend Poetry, I think it's Southend Poetry Club. Yeah, they meet regularly, and they have writing kind of meets and stuff as well. I get involved with an online thing which is open to people across the world, which is an event for disabled people, and that's been a really a lifeline for me because I can do it no matter what. And they say to us, you can have your screens off, you can be laying down, you can turn up in your pyjamas. I'd quite like to have an event like that, like an in-person event where you just turn up however, you don't need to worry about how you look and stuff. But yeah, as I say, I think there's always something going on. I think there was one last night, maybe, at the coffee house, Utopia, that RJ was doing dangerous poetry. So yeah, that's been going for quite a long time as well.
So I'm going to read. The first one I ever did, I did with the Estuary Fringe Festival. Has anyone heard of the Estuary Fringe Festival? Yeah, that's cool. This is all we've ever known. The messenger wears a bulletproof vest to bear a grunt from a shot to the chest. No personal gripe from receiver come. He is agile to dodge the spirits of some. The scars on his body are the marks that he wears, like a badge to warn all who stare. It's the risky chance of first-class flight, a job no one wants, not even in slight. For murder isn't justified by prayer. Freedom is not the wind blowing through your hair. Cowards defy the true words of man as their fetid efforts are met with sham. The sweat and the tears of a life you sought, a perfection which cannot be bought. They can end it all with the touch of a button. Some see a leader, I see a spineless glutton. For all you are fighting for is just a paper war, and no matter how you write it, it all remains the same. So we will cut their throats, and we will raise this void, and we will soak the grounds of painted black. They proclaim lands of victory, lands they will never truly own. For man will live his final day where they rip his beating heart away. Eyes they look, they do not see, as lungs whisper for death's plea. The world he knows starts to slip away, the home where his children used to play. And to believe that these truths are fallacy will only bring you tears of misery. But all they are fighting for is just for heaven's sake. So let's set this world ablaze and reach for all that's fake. I'm RJ Limouth. I'm a non-binary poet from Westcliff-on-Sea. I also do photography. I'm a musician. My understanding is that Dangerous Poetry was started by Mark Sharp and Patsy Link many years ago. And then I believe John Bully just kind of came into the fold of it. But the whole ethos around it is that it doesn't matter whether or not you're a seasoned poet or you've never read before, or you've just kind of written a little something down and you're just trying, or anything like that. It doesn't matter if you've done it about like gardens and flowers and puppies, or you're doing it about, anti-fascist stuff, aggressive stuff, solemn stuff. The point is that it's all inclusive, like properly all inclusive, not just, oh, cool, you're a poet online. Oh, we can evidence you're a poet. Cool, we'll get you in. It's literally anyone and their dog can come and read some poetry. So it lives out of the Utopia Coffee Lounge, which is in the Royals. I took it on a few years ago, and as far as I know, it's always lived there. I have taken it to South Street Coffee, which is down. It's in South Church, but I haven't really taken it anywhere per se in terms of that. I've mainly stayed in Southend, if I'm honest, because I just feel that I want to kind of support and network within the scene first before I start going out towards like London and Thurrock and such and so forth. I have no idea why I'm a poet. I first got into poetry in the second year of senior school through my English teacher, who very gently and positively showed me people like Benjamin Zephaniah and a lot of Shakespeare, Carol Ann Duffy, all of that sort of key stage stuff, but just showed me it and then explained it to me, and it just hit a resonance. I don't know what it was, and then I started going through there really, and at the time I was really getting into sort of heavy metal, and a lot of the messaging in heavy metal is very, very positive, given the genre of music that it is. So I started reading the lyrics to that, and then started kind of writing stuff from there. So, I mean, gosh, what was I, 12, 13, I think, when I started, but I can't tell you exactly why, it just resonates with me. I'd recommend taking yourself down to Dangerous Poetry, or there's one called Big Words that's starting up at the Royal. There's one at the Muse. There's also the Poetry Society in Lee, and there's stuff that happens at North. Take yourself down to one of them and listen to people and get involved.
My name's Annette Basham. I'm on the committee of Southend Pride, also chair of Transpy, which is the local trans support network. Through these two organisations, I've got involved in the queer poetry scene, which has been running for about 9 years, I would say. Yeah, so the first Southend Pride event was in 2018, which was the same year that the first festival and parade happened, and they decided that along with the main event on the day, they were going to have some fringe events during the week before. So one of them, they wanted to do a poetry event called Proud Poetry. That was at Utopia. So we had two Proud Poetries, 2018 and 19. Then there was one done online during lockdown. Yeah, and we've been doing it there ever since. It's an opportunity for queer voices to be heard on the local poetry scene, because there are a lot of other poetry events. There's open mics, dangerous poetry. I know there's a lot. And yeah, I mean, we do have, there are LGBT poets that attend these, but I feel some of the themes they're talking about and writing about, they're maybe not so comfortable reading them at wider events. It's always amazing. It's such a lovely event. The diversity of poetry, even within that community, is by queer people, but not exclusively for queer people. Yeah, it's a chance for their voices to be heard.
So I'm Maddie Kilsby McMurray. My pronouns are they, them. I've been writing poetry for a few years now. I write under the tag Trashfire Poet. So I am active on Instagram, but I also do, you may have seen them around, I do these little temporary stickers that go up on light posts, which are just 4-line poems, because there's always people that read stickers, and I just like to think of putting poetry out there. So for me, it started as a journaling practice. So as part of doing some therapy, it was suggested that I start journaling, but I don't know whether it's because I have ADHD or what, but the idea of just writing to a book didn't really work with my brain. It didn't work at all. So I started writing bits of poetry to get all the chaos out of my brain and onto paper, never ever expecting anyone to read it or listen to it or anyone to even know it existed. And then I started to get more confident with form, with rhythm, etc. And then I made some comments to RJ, who you've already spoken to, about the fact that I write some poetry, and I got a gentle but also not so gentle shove into the open mic scene. So starting to read at Southend, at Pride Poetry. I've done a bit at Dangerous Poetry as well, and also at the Poetry Social Club in Lee. My thing with my poetry is it started out trying to unravel the chaos in my brain, but it's now trying to really talk about political things, talk about what's happening, but in a hopeful, joyful way, in a rallying way to bring people together. And I can't say if I'm any good at it, although, you know, you can't really compare poetry. It's not something that should be compared, but I enjoy it, and that's the important thing. I went initially with Trashfire Poet because I said that, right at the start, I said that my poetry was, you know, it was written in haste, it was never meant to be read, and it was designed to be thrown in the trash or burnt, because it was not typical poetry. You know, I've never studied poetry. I did English literature at school, but that was a long time ago now. Never really understood the form, and so I kind of went into it without any expectations of showing anyone, you know, actively destroying some of the poems that I wrote at first, because it was just that was part of the process. And it gave me the freedom to be able to just let go of my work, to write something and then just, you know, burn it, put it out in the atmosphere and come back for the next thing and build on it. I'm not so much of a Trashfire poet anymore. I haven't burnt any poems in a long time, but I like to keep that attitude of not everything that I write has to go out in the wild world, but also it's okay to write stuff very quickly, for it to be a little bit scrappy, for it not to hit the right forms or anything like that. So, yeah.
Goodbye, 34. Goodbye, 34, and all those days on the floor, breathing through the panic of doing too much and wishing for more. Goodbye to my study books, 6 years banished to nooks, in my memory nestled away, stuck there like fishermen's hooks. Goodbye to hidden poetry, now dragged out constantly. Give me a mic, let me be loud, and I'll share my soliloquy. Goodbye to the birds who sung, kept my heartstrings strung, while I wandered in the woods, and my whole body felt like dung. Goodbye to art both given and made, wrapped, held with care, displayed on my walls and in my heart, every space a colourful cascade. Goodbye to the tears wept and to the days I overslept that can't be gotten back now, only experienced, never kept. Goodbye, goodbye to hate, shouts over the imagined gate, scornful voices throwing spears. I refuse to let them use me as bait. Goodbye, 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 this year has wrung me dry, but fear not, my cup is full and ready for next year's highs.
It's not in my nature to be manly. I might be 6'2", broad-shouldered and bearded, but nearly all of my thoughts are of fear. The mere mention of human contact has me stumbling. A phone call may as well be a mountain to climb, and this one's probably high enough to keep me from you. My valley of self-doubt fills with belittling thoughts until it becomes a river too wide to swim across. I feel at my least manly around manly men. Mechanics, builders, blokes in pubs leave me feeling like a little boy who just wants his mum or probably my dad to speak for me. I find myself putting on a voice, parroting what I see and hear. "Alright mate, can you have a look at my motor? I think my brakes might need doing." I nod knowingly at terms I don't understand. A half-asleep chameleon, I try to blend in but can't. I overcompensate like a gorilla beating his chest and hope he doesn't ask me a question. My projection of manly is beta at best. A tiger can't change its stripes, and I pander so much I may as well be black and white. Yeah mate, I know what you mean. It's a fucking joke, innit? I'm a puppy with its head tilted sideways, not knowing what's going on. If I can escape this garage without looking a complete prick, I'll consider it a victory. A symphony of self-congratulation will sing to me as I think to myself, I've gotten away with that. I feel like a cat with all 9 lives intact. A seal that dodged an orca. I feel relieved like me and back in my natural habitat. Socially awkward and anxious introverts aren't conversationalists at the best of times, and that's magnified when you feel like prey. Not that they see me that way necessarily, but I'm an overthinker and it's in my nature to obsess. I'm Jake Nathan. I've been doing poetry for about 6 or 7 years. I just put out my first book, a pamphlet called A Life in a Day, Nathan Jake, incomplete, and just trying to make my way in the poetry world. I came into it through hip hop, really. I was a big hip hop fan, and through searching for a rapper called Common on YouTube, I found Deaf Poetry, and watched his video and thought that was really cool, and then started watching some of the poets' videos, and really liked it and thought, that's something that I could get into and something I could do. I think I just use poetry as a way of expressing myself. Writing is a really useful way for me to sort of think about what I'm feeling, figure out how I'm feeling, and I've always really liked words, sort of playing with words and rhymes and stuff like that. So it's just a way that I express myself, and a way that sort of I find engagement in the world. Yeah, I really like the poetry scene in Southend. I live about 45 minutes to an hour away, but I come down to get involved. There's a lot of good poetry, a lot of good poets as well. My first experience of it was through the poetry that I used to have at Peggy's on a Sunday. I met Aaron Shrimpton through a slam that we both did, and he invited me down to Peggy's. And I met Lola, and MEP was headlining that event, who's a local poet. And it was a really good time there. And I went back a few times, and then I got involved in running some events with Aaron. We ran them at Messel in Chalkwell Park, and through that met lots of people as well. I met Holly D through the first one, who's a really good local poet. And then my favourite poetry night in Essex at the moment is a poetry social club that they're running in Lee at North, which is run by Rachel and Jen, which is a really good. It's a lovely poetry night. Really good vibe there. But yeah, I've made a lot of friends. I got really close with Dave Carr, who's a local poet. He's in his 80s, but we really connected, and we've become good friends. I'm helping Dave put a selected works of his book, of his poetry in a book to put out, which is really cool. Yeah, when I started, it was very much about sort of just performing poetry and doing spoken word, as they call it. But the more I sort of got into poetry and met other poets and read books that they were doing, making a book became a lot more interesting to me. And then I'm sure you've been through it as well. When you're doing poetry or creative things, you go through sort of peaks and troughs. And I got to a point where I didn't really want to perform. I still wanted poetry in my life, so I thought I'll write a book. And as I said, I got started on sort of the poetry track by hip hop, and I've always been a big hip hop fan. So I've written a book of poems to the titles of hip hop songs, sort of using the titles as prompts and ignoring the songs and just writing a poem to the title. As sort of a nod to my love of hip hop and my love of poetry mixed together.
My name is Aaron Shrimpton. I have quite deep-rooted connection to the poetry scene in Essex, maybe slightly nationally. I made music videos for and filmed lots of poets, but one of the main ones I filmed quite a lot was Scroobius Pip, someone I grew up with. I made loads of his videos, and he became very successful, not off the back of my videos, but because he was very good. And that kind of gave me a kickstart into making videos for a living. But then I filmed quite a lot of his friends, one of them Kay Tempest, and I made a poem, I guess, in reaction to watching Kay when I was on the dole, when I'd left university, and it made me it was quite a cathartic experience, writing about being massively skint but having a first class honours degree and not really knowing what to do with it, and having to walk not even being able to afford the bus, so I was that skint. And then I started perfecting it, and it got pretty good. And then at one point, I think it was quite a few years later, I'd written quite a few at this point, and I thought, well, I really should go and perform it somewhere. I tried to do it with music, it sucked. And then I went to Dangerous Poetry at Utopia Cafe, did my first poem, absolutely terrified, got through it, and then from there on in, I think every now and again, if something locally popped up, I would start going along just to practice and hone my skills. And then they were Peggy Sues, there was one in Basildon at the time, and then I started sponsoring poets to come down from London or Canterbury in Kent to come perform at Peggy's, and I thought it'd be good to bring some of those people to Southend to mix it up a little bit with us. And then after that, I thought, actually, you know what, I'd quite like to do my own event and bring again, bring people down from outside the area and mix it up with the array of talent that is here. And that was an event called Words in Chalk. I think we've done 4 so far. And it's at Metal Chalk Hall. We've had amazing people down, and then that's recently mutated into an event which clashed with an experimental video project I did called Estuary Dreams, and I called it Estuary Dreams Spoken. A mashup of experimental video, sort of performance art, poetry, prose, readings, grime, we even had some acoustic music, so it was a great eclectic mashup.
They say I'm not too commercial. They say I'm not too commercial. They say I'm not too commercial when my lyrics aren't too broad. Well, I'm not here to sell cereal. I'm just here to stop me from being bored. And I'm far from being perfect. And I'm very much far from me giving up. Far from being perfect. And I'm very much far from me giving up. I'm far from being perfect. And I'm very much far from me giving up. Fuck.
Trash Pigs, it's one of the many things I think we all appreciate that was born out of lockdown, and was doing a lot of Zoom calls with people and speaking to my friend Violet, and who we used to run poetry nights together back in London. We're like, it'd be fun to do some stuff together. It's for those of you who haven't seen us, it's a backing track and we sing at the front, so I like to think of it as a sweary Pet Shop Boys, is how I describe it. We try to write songs which are I like the idea of, I'm a big fan of what I would call gleeful obscenity without malice. So even though we do sort of shout and swear about injustice, we do take some issues are quite serious. I also quite like the idea that you would go, well actually it's quite rude, it's quite crude, but it's not awful, your mum or your auntie could still like it even though it's quite full on, because the targets are justified things. It's important that we go back to the folk roots of talking about things people actually experience. Well, technically, I'm autistic, but as they say, not official yet, but peer-reviewed. But that also feeds into it. That's the thing. You go, I do this really cool thing, and I get interested in the sampling, and it really helps. I find the Trash Pigs, even though it's quite a good outlet for being sort of fun and carnage, it also helps with my special interests and sampling and loops and creating music, and also editing music as well as creating music. So it's very good for me. What I try to do is, it's a little bit like the John Lennon thing. I think John Lennon gave a quote once where he's talking about songwriting, and he said, just cut to the chase, get to the nub of the matter, and make it rhyme. And that's how you do a song, so that's one of what I try to do, is not be overly clever, but still just, because on the one hand it's quite difficult. If you just want to go, if you don't like this, you can go fuck yourself. You've still got to make that sort of eloquent, but at the same time you don't want to lose that actual thing, and also stand up for the right people, because obviously we want it to be a gang, and I like to think that even though sometimes we don't specifically name a certain thing, you know what we're talking about, or even if we don't, we're just basically talking about marginalised people. So even if we don't specifically name the actual definition of that marginalised person, you can still get behind the song. Even if that's not you, would still be able to identify with the feelings of people thinking that who and what you are is wrong when you're not wrong. So even if it's not specifically about that, and also I don't want to speak about things that I am not myself part of, but it's also but we all know if you are we know what it's like to be bullied for disabilities or this, that and the other, so there's a huge spectrum of what those could be. If you're going to speak out about things, you need to be trusted as actually they are on the right side of things. So I hope that makes sense. That got very woolly.
Devil's advocates can fuck right off. 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 You need to have a good old look at who you are impressing. Playing devil's advocates as you with those oppressing. Arguing the toss over something huge like race just means you think there is a time racism has its place. Slightly declaring that fascism has two sides just means you stand in favour of those who genocide. Well, actually, I think we'll find there's more to it than that. No, the razor, shut your mouth, you fucking awful twats. Devils advocates can fuck right off. 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 Not everything is up for debate. And doing so empowers hate. No matter how hard you state your case, some things don't ever have a time or a place. Cruelty hypothetical still causes us pain. The same ties of arguments again and again. You don't even believe it, this is your idea of fun. Demeaning our existence somehow makes you think you've won. Devils advocates can fuck right off. Everybody, devils advocates can fuck right off. Devils advocates can fuck right off. Devils advocates can fuck right off. Why do you feel the need to prove your intellectual clout by arguing the demographics we could do without? Too many people think us just existing is wrong, and all your stupid bullshit does is make those dickheads strong. You could use your powers for good and encourage understanding, but you rather spot this point with needless grandstanding. None of it needed saying, and as we further delve, it's clear all you mass debaters can go and fuck yourselves. Devils advocates can fuck right off. Devils advocates can fuck right off. Devils advocates can fuck right off. Devils advocates can fuck right off.
So my name's Sonny Green. First thing I'd done was when I was in year 5 at Prince Avenue, and I'd done a talent competition, and I just wanted to be on stage, and my mum, well, I wanted to do a poem and my mum thought it was a good idea, so that's what happened. And then obviously I went on to start rapping and MCing and recording songs in community centres and stuff like that. It's just an accessible art form where anyone can do it and can get stuck into it, and it's just making sense of a life that is sometimes difficult to understand. So it's trying to put words around feelings and moments, which is not always easy to do, but making sense of it in a way with your words and using your words to elevate moments even and describe and lift up moments of time.
Southend, how you doing? This is really what Southend means to me, so I hope you enjoy it, and thank you all for coming out tonight. I love you loads, and I'll see you soon. Here's what Southend means to me, the real Southend. Southend to me is buskers under the bridge, Salvo the Clown somewhere around town, and a beach being 10 to 15 minutes from wherever you live. It's Priory, Chalkhall, South Church Park, where we grew up and had a laugh. It's more than just fish and chips, but listen, we definitely have the best fish and chips in Britain. Yeah! It's my cheeky little seaside town, always punching above its weight, so yeah, we're a city now. R.I.P. Sir David Amos, you've done this city proud. It's more than rides and the rage, it's seeing the world's best artists at the Cliffs live on a stage. Fireworks in the winter, dreaming of brighter days. It's Kurzel, Clooney, Bourne's Green, you know. So much talent around here, man, we're soon to blow. Like back in the day when Y2K had today's grime legends on the Queensway estate. It's Hamley Court Road and Rossi's Ice Cream, bumping into old friends saying, bruv, how you been? Commuting into London on the C2C, or tourists coming here to see the sea. From Shoebury to Lee, this is home to me. Peter Boat and cobbled streets, in the borough there's hope, the estuary dreams. Bank holiday Monday, motorbikes, fast cars, the shakedown, Christmas lights, our streets large. City day, city jam, have you seen RR? Say what you want about Southend, but this place has heart. The sunset shimmers and the sea turns gold. 2050, our dreams are bold. We are Southend, we are rock, we are roll. You can take our sound, but can't take our soul. Southend taught me the tide always turns, even when it takes its time. It's not where dreams end, it's where they learn how to survive. So yeah, this is home, and we have got pride, where our children are born, grow, and live their lives. For some it's a beach, sun, and a seaside, but for us it's every day, so let's keep it nice, yeah. See, I love Southend, cause it's home to me. All roads don't lead back to Rome for me, they lead here, at the start of the pier, where we face our fears, so let's walk, but promise you'll come back, and let everyone know where Southend's at.
Thanks for listening to this edition of the You Better Hear podcast. On this show, you heard the voices of Adrian Green, Paul Barrett, Joe Overfield, Ruth Hazel, aka Fanny von Beaverhausen, RJ Learmouth, Annette Basham, Maddie Killsbury McMurray, aka Trashfire Poet, Jake Nathan, Aaron Shrimpton, Richard Sandling of Trash Pigs, and Sonny Green. Performed were Wilko at the Railway by Adrian Green, with thanks to Focal Point Gallery, Lunar Lake Haiku by Adrian Green at the Southend Jazz Centre, with Brian Stiles, Philip Vaxman, Ian Brighton, Jeff Harris, Dave Jago, Zach Barrett and Trevor Taylor, Quiet Defiance by Ruth Hazel, All We've Ever Known by RJ Learmouth at the You Better Hear Zine Festival at Craftwork Beers, Goodbye 34 by Trashfire Poet, Nature by Jake Nathan, Fuck by Aaron Shrimpton, Devil's Advocates by Trash Pigs at Estuary Dreams Spoken at Metal Chalkwell Hall, and What Southend Means to Me by Sonny Green at Southend City Day. Thanks to everybody who provided venues for the interviews or helped out, including South Records, the Alex Pub, the Forum Shared Space, St Mark's Church, the Broker Pub and the Portuguese Cafe in Hamlet Court Road. Also to Trevor Taylor for the live Jazz Centre recording. I'm Graham Burnett. Look forward to seeing you all again soon.